Hey, good evening, church. I hope that this evening finds you well and healthy and living in the middle of a great week in our Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome to what we're calling COVID-19 and God's Global Church. Last week, we got to spend some time via video conference with a couple of our foreign missionaries. We were able to talk to Junior and Patricia Lira down in Brasilia, and we also talked to Seth Bushell, who's spreading the gospel in the Bronx in New York City. And tonight we're going to be visiting with Tony Morrow and with Jared Odhiambo. And let me set this up by just kind of reminding all of us that, you know, our church family here at Central has been disrupted by this virus crisis, and we've been saying over the last 3 months that while our worship services were suspended for a while, and while our Bible classes and small groups were disrupted, that the mission still continues, that the gospel is not in quarantine, and our God never shelters in place, and that the gospel keeps going forward. And the very same thing can be said for our missionary partners in Ukraine and in Kenya. Their lives have been disrupted. The normal way that they practice their call, what God has called them to do, has been disrupted and even put on hold. But they're having to be creative. They're having to think through different kinds of ways to do what God's called them to do. And so we think it'd be a good idea just to get caught up with them, and maybe we can learn some things from what our foreign missionaries are doing in similar circumstances, but in very different places and cultures. So tonight we're going to be talking first with Tony Morrow. He is one of our homegrown missionaries. Pat Treat and Monette, I guess Monette, Pat, was teaching Tony at elementary school?
High school.
Oh, it's high school.
Yeah.
Okay, but still, that was a long time ago, and he kind of grew up in y'all's huddle. So you and Monette have a long relationship with Tony Morrow.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
So Pat set up the Zoom interview, and he spoke with Tony, and you know, we know Tony. He gets here to Amarillo a lot, and we've sent a couple of groups to Ukraine to visit him, and Shanna and Elizabeth, and our own Bill Hayes actually lives there now at our house. And just remind us real quick, Pat, what happens at our house. These are young people who have aged out of the state's orphanage programs.
That's correct. They still get a stipend every month if they're in school, which most of them, all of them are. And so, you know, they still have some support, but it's, you know, it's like $50 a month.
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. You know?
Doesn't pay the bills.
No. And, you know, Tony moved in. You know, he keeps them busy on projects. They have Bible study every day, and time to pray, and he just really works with them as best he can. You know, he reads scripture, and he, you know, tells them how we're going to live this out.
Yeah.
And so that's what he does.
Well, it's life skills training and spiritual formation in Christ.
That's
both.
correct.
And it's a holistic approach to changing young people's lives in Ukraine. Right. So I wanted, before we look at Tony's video and y'all's conversation, I want to throw this out to the church family. If you would, in the comments section, if you would just let us know you're watching, and any comments at all that you want to make, any questions that you want to ask, we'll certainly address those. Pat will do his best to answer your questions. And here's the question I want to ask, just to kind of, I guess how do you say it, just to kind of prime the pump a little bit. But I want to know where you have gone on a foreign mission trip, and what did you learn on that mission trip? So where have you gone before on a foreign mission trip, if you'll type that in, and then what did you learn? Pat, I believe, and I know our Foreign Missions Committee believes, and our church believes, that going on foreign mission trips shapes us. It changes us. I know the trip that you and Monette took to Ukraine 20 years ago shaped you in the way you view the kingdom. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, it was very eye-opening, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Very eye-opening. First, I've never been to a third world country, and I guess I just didn't understand. And that worked out really well. And just the conditions they live, almost everybody uses public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's cars, but that's the elite group. But their whole life is completely different. Open air, grocery stores that you can go get fresh eggs and, you know, vegetables grown by the local population, and it's a different way. Everything's a little bit slower there than it is here.
Yeah. I remember the very first foreign outside of the United States mission trip that I took was also to Ukraine, to a little town, Kharkov, Ukraine, just south of Kyiv. And we had some missionaries at the Legacy Church that we supported there, David and Olivia Nelson. And Carrie Ann and I were there for 10 days, and just eye-opening, just to how different the culture is and how different people live and the conditions and the underdevelopment as far as just the things that we take for granted over here. And the thing that it taught me spending 10 days with those wonderful people is that our God is at work in every city on this planet, and the Lord is at work in every person's life. You know, no matter where you go, no matter how far away you go from your home, you can't get away from God's work. And that really made an impression on me.
Yeah. We visited 5 orphanages when we went over there, and those kids they would just come hold on to you and everything else, you know, just craving attention.
Yeah.
And that was very eye-opening, and I'm glad to see that Tony's bringing them on through, because so many of them, once they get out of an orphanage, it doesn't turn out very well.
Yeah, they slip through the cracks.
Yeah. So I was real encouraged with that, and we met with all the people running one orphanage one night, and I got to tell them about the Tower of Babel and why languages are like they are, and you know, and anyway, after that evening was over, Tony came up to me and said, "Man, you were plowing with a tractor." Anyway, but there was just lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
Lots of opportunities.
Well, before we watch Tony's video, before we watch this conversation, I would again ask you to type in, where have you gone on a foreign mission trip, and what did it teach you? Linda Burke, West Africa, you know, and just the loving people. Christy Clapp, she's been to Kenya 7 times, you know, it's her family. She sees what Jesus is doing in Kenya. Hannah McNeil, trips to Guyana. Lanny Newton, Kenya. Bogota, Kisumu, Colombia, you know. It shapes us when we experience the Lord at work in a different country, in a different culture. Before we start the conversation, Pat, what is it that we should be looking for? Is there anything particular that you'd like us to be listening for and paying attention to?
Oh, that's a tough one. You know, there's a lot of material that we went through in the interview, and but I think the big thing is how, you know, they've gone from having 12 to 15 at the house to 22, 23.
Because of the virus.
Because of the virus.
Yeah.
And so that's changed quite a bit. But the kids have done very well. Tony said that they have, you know, hadn't been a lot of interpersonal conflict or anything during this time. So these are good kids.
Yeah,
they really are. They're good kids.
And they've got a good family there leading them. This is our missionary in the Ukraine at our house, Tony Morrow.
I think at the time I was coaching basketball at Kiev International School. We were on a trip and found out that they were going to start shutting. They were going to start shutting schools down.
Okay.
And so we were on a tournament, and we had to come back a day early. And then that's when things started becoming a little more real in Ukraine. Some of this, and you can elaborate on stuff, Pat, if it's unclear. At the time, in my understanding, not many countries had many testing capabilities. And so they were just starting to try to develop the testing to see. And so as more cases started showing up, that's when Ukraine started shutting down businesses. So over about a month, there's about a month-long period here, they started shutting down businesses, they started shutting down schools, to the point to eventually when they basically had everything on lockdown, okay, which has been about, I think we've been about two months was complete quarantine. The only things that were left open were hospitals, pharmacies, grocery stores, and banks. Those are the only things that were left open. And then they started, it started at first where they shut down some of their transportation because Ukraine relies heavily on public transportation, whether it be buses or trains or whatever, metros. They started shutting them down just because, so many people packed in together. And eventually all the public transportation was shut down. And it was many of our young people have at least part-time jobs. And so it was at that time, again, now it's been about 2.5 months ago, to where, the public transportation is what they depended upon to get to their jobs. Some of their jobs had been closed anyway. So that's when pretty much we had full lockdown here, full quarantine here at the village at our house. As far as being sick and what to do, okay, the only information that we could get was, okay, if you are sick, because, you could just be a general sickness, no one knew. Anybody started sneezing, everybody was afraid. And so they just said, if you're sick, you're running a temperature, just stay at home. And then if you get to the point where you're having trouble breathing, then contact us. Okay. And so that was kind of their initial way of trying to deal with it. And then they would come get you in an ambulance and then take you to a hospital, run testing on you to see, and then go from there.
Okay. Well, how did everybody react to all the changes? I mean, you had 12 kids there.
We had 12 full-time plus Shannon, Elizabeth, myself, and our full-time interpreter, Lena. But then when that happened, then everybody kind of converged on the house. So then we went from 12 to 20. We went from 14, 15 here full-time to 22 here full-time.
Okay. And that's because they lost their jobs or couldn't go to work?
Jobs, schools, they shut down schools as well. Okay. And so everybody pretty much went to online learning, which I think has been a pretty common practice for most countries. And so in the mornings, kind of our typical pattern when everything happened and we started adjusting to quarantine life here in the village, mornings from about 8 till 12 was when we would have internet on and the kids would be doing their homework, downloading assignments, completing assignments, and things like that. And then, in the afternoons, we'll get to some of this in a minute, but I just started asking God, okay, what do we need to be doing with this time now that we have together? One, so that we make some pretty good use of it, but another so that we don't just drive one another absolutely crazy. And so projects, activities, just a variety of things to try to keep our minds positively involved and our energies focused in good ways.
Yeah.
When it finally got serious, and then they started requiring masks when you go to places and limiting the number of people to go into grocery stores and stuff like that. That's when I really set everybody down. We had a big family meeting, basically, because a lot of times when you were getting all kinds of crazy information online that it's some kind of a hoax, that this isn't true, that, and our kids are receiving all this garbage online as well. And so we had to sit everybody down and say, okay, look, this is real. And they're just trying to figure out how to deal with it. Okay. And they were kind of with a lot of people at the first year. They're like, well, we're young and we're, basically healthy, and why, and I said, well, because there's a lot of people that aren't so young and a lot of people that aren't basically healthy, and maybe you would get it and it wouldn't be so bad, but maybe you would give it to somebody else and they would die from it. And we also have a couple of our young people that smoke, and have forever, they have since they were in the orphanage. We also kind of shared with them, we said, look, their lungs are already compromised, and this is a disease that pretty much attacks your lungs. And if some of our young people get it that are smokers, they could die from it. Okay. So we had to kind of unpack the seriousness of what was going on. We were able to get masks. Elizabeth had bought several masks for something else. She was doing some manicure kind of things. And so she had it, and, so she just had an abundance of masks that she had purchased for that anyway. So we already had enough to kind of get us going. Okay?
Right.
But over time, you could get masks and things like that. But we did have to talk about basic, hand sanitization, and we bought a whole bunch of hand sanitizer, and everybody had a bottle of hand sanitizer. And so if they went into a store, they had connection or contact with anybody that, we talked about how to, make sure that you cleaned your hands and things like that. And talked about the importance of social distancing and tried to help them understand how the disease is communicated mostly.
What adjustments did y'all have to implement for our house?
Gracious.
The cleaning,
definitely.
Cleaning twice a week.
Well, we did. We adjusted on that, and then just trying to make sure that we were, we kept our own, because most of our kids have been working jobs. They'd been with the public when they shut everything down, and so we were even unaware of, maybe some of us already had it, or
right.
We didn't know. When you've got so many people living together, there's not much you can do but ride it out if you've got it and everybody gets it, So just a lot of prayer that we didn't have it, right? Up to our cleaning twice a week. We had to go, our visits to the grocery store increased double, just because we had so many people now staying here at the house. It will now be a good time to talk about just kind of our projects and things and activities that we did to stay busy.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I probably, I tried to help them understand, this is a difficult time, but you've got all this extra time now. And that doesn't mean that you can become the number one player on your video game, your online streaming video,
Right.
Try to use it as a time to increase your understanding of your relationship with God, of other things that you've been interested in. Let's try to use this as a time to, just increase our information on some stuff, and especially in our relationship with God. And so, they wanted to study Revelation, which was interesting. And so we kind of got into an in-depth study of Revelation, which was, it was interesting for sure. I think I've gained a little more insight into what I think some of it might mean, but in the end we win. And so that was good. But, so that was, and it was their choice. I said, what do you guys want to study here? Let's study Revelation. I said, okay. And so, that was interesting. We beefed up a lot of our projects. And so I made a list. Goodness, we were probably about 3/4 of the way completed with our projects down at our pole barn. All right. And I wanted to be careful on spending funding, just because one thing that we were aware of at first is when people were losing their jobs, I was concerned about people in our village being able to have food, clothes, and basic stuff like that. So I tried to be wise with the money that we had, and which was good because we all went through and took a lot of our clothes some ways. This is kind of overlapping into some of the ways that God was working in some specific ways through us to bless people through this time to this point. Okay. Mm-hmm. We went through and gathered up all of our clothes that we don't use, shoes that we don't use, and we bagged up about 5 bags of clothing, and were able to bless. We have a large gypsy population here, but we were able to bless several families with a lot of clothing. Also, there was we have quite a few families that do ask for money on a consistent basis. And they, and so one thing that we would do when I would have, and I wanted our young people to see this, when we were asked for money for food, instead we would take them and buy the food with them.
Yeah.
And so we were ensured that that's where the money was going to, but also just, as a good example of possibly how to do right better. and to try to get into the life of a person that you're trying to help. So we did have some good opportunities to help some families here with some food, with some clothing and stuff like that over the past couple of months.
Okay. What steps has the government taken toward normalization of things? It's not as strict anymore, right?
No, about 2 weeks ago, I think, and again, give or take a couple of days here on timeline, they started. They first opened up. I don't know, maybe a certain percentage of the bus routes of public transportation. A week later, they opened up some of the trains. They opened some of the borders and opened up some of the trains and things for people for travel. And then I think last week they opened up our electric trains now that are coming back and forth through the villages and have started opening more stores. So a couple of our kids have already started back to their working.
Oh, really?
Their job. And so I think probably we're at 70 to 80% of public transportation being opened, and probably about the same with businesses and restaurants and hotels and things like that have been shut down for quarantine.
Yeah.
Ukraine itself opened about a week ago, opened domestic flights. Yesterday opened international flights. And these are limited at present. But we're back in the start of, they're still requiring masks and they're still requiring social distancing, but they have open parks and things like that again. So, like I said, about 70 to 80% maybe toward opening.
Okay. What's the future look like?
I think that's a great question for everybody, right? Only God knows. Yeah.
That's right.
I think everybody's taking it a day at a time. I think, like most countries, if I'm understanding things, it's a real balance between do you let your economy tank, trying to take care of your economy and jobs and things like that, with the fact that the virus is going to be a part of our daily life for a while. And so what's the wisest way to handle that? For me, I thank God that none of us are sick. For anybody and everyone connected with our house ministry, you guys are prayed for every day, prayed for protection, for blessing, to God's glory, that people see the way that we deal with this and help one another through it, and that the love of God is something that's seen very clearly through all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The question, Pat, I don't know.
Yeah.
Taking it a day at a time and trying to love people, and yeah.
Okay. All right. You see God working in some really surprising ways?
I was trying to see the thing that I talked about a little bit already, was just that one of the things that we wanted to do was to be a positive, and that's what we've wanted to be, but even more so a positive example of help. And we've let people know in a variety of ways, if there's food that's needed, if there's clothes that's needed, if there's a need that we can help with. Maybe we can't do it all, but we can definitely help.
Yeah. Okay.
And we have where we could. God definitely enabled 22 people to live together pretty graciously. It gets tiring. It's tiring when you live with 12 to 15 people full time. As you add more, and then little spaces that you used to have before that were kind of accessible, we're not finding ways just to be. Again, God has blessed us with a lot of patience, not perfection for sure, but I've been surprised that we haven't had more conflict than what we've had. So I've been very grateful for that.
That's good.
Let's see. I think again the kids' interest in trying the daily diet that I gave them was I just for everyone trying to go deeper in their relationship with God, and trying to teach them how to pray, mostly how to listen. and then let God reveal himself to them through his peace mostly at first, and then a lot of times in answering prayers it kind of develops from there. But just really wanting them and hoping and praying that as they've seen us, experienced us, and then experienced this time together, that their relationship with God has become more real to them. And I'm very hopeful that that has happened with a couple of them.
Yeah. Great. Well, hey, we love you.
Love you.
And hope everything goes well. And thanks for taking the time. I mean, like you really have a half hour to sit down with me.
Hey, man, this is a blessing. Let me tell you, as I was thinking and praying, I thought, Lord, bless our time. Let it be what it needs to be. But yeah, it's nice to do something else and have a grown-up to talk to. But I know that you're thinking that you wish you had a grown-up to talk to too.
Yeah.
But I want to say thank you to Central as a lot of this stuff has happened. The Central family, you guys, Pat, have been such a tremendous blessing in more ways than I can reasonably say. But I just thank God for you guys. I thank God for the Central family, and just very grateful for you guys. So thank you for everything.
I love listening to Tony Morrow talk, and I love hearing his heart. And it sounds like to me, Pat, he had those kids, those young people going from morning till night.
Yeah, he did. He did.
As we listen to you and Tony in your conversation, Pat, what is it that you hear in his heart and in the things that he's doing that maybe we here in Amarillo, Texas, that we here in our Central Church family, that we can take from what Tony's doing and apply it into our own context? What can we learn?
Well, we need to share our faith. We need to be an example. Tony will take kids, when they're going out to give some neighbors food or something like that, he'll take the kids with him.
Yeah.
And they see his example. And, they're orphans, so they haven't been around a mother and father. And they don't understand how a marriage relationship is supposed to work.
They don't have a model.
Right. And so Tony and Shannon do great at being an example as far as what a Christian marriage is. And it really impacts those kids. It really does.
I was struck by a line he said. I think he said something like, show them how to do the right thing better.
Right.
I thought that was interesting, the way he phrased that.
Yeah.
By example.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I'm very grateful, Pat, for your heart, for you and Monette both, for the way that you just reflect God's glory in the compassion that you show to other people, to missionaries, but to other Christians, and just other men and women and young people around the country and around the world. I'm grateful for that.
Well, thanks, Alan.
All right. Pat, thank you. We don't have a commercial break, so this is us doing it live. Yeah, so you and Monette go get some dinner, and I'm gonna bring, where are y'all going?
I don't know.
Okay, well, let Monette pick. Elaine Nesbitt, come on in here and have a seat, sister. This is Mom, because we're about to hear your interview with Jared Odhiambo, and he just calls you Mom and Mama, right? He has forever. Well, and you're also the namesake of Elaine Nesbitt High School, and I always have to remind you of that, although you don't need reminding. So Jared Odhiambo is the director of the Alara and Ring Road Ministries in Kisumu, Kenya. We know this. We've been partners with Jared and with the great work in Kenya for a long, long time, and they're providing clothes, food, shelter, and a Christian education to hundreds of kids. Most people in our church family have adopted at least one or two of these young children, and so thank you. And I know you got Tim McMenemy with you. He's taken several trips with you to Kenya. So you two interviewed Jared.
Yes.
Why? Because I've seen the video. Why is he in his car doing the interview? Explain that to us.
He really wanted to be at home with his family when he did the interview, but he had to go out to Alara, and on the way back, there was a lot of traffic, bad roads, and he knew he wasn't going to make it, so he just pulled over and we did the Zoom on the side of the road.
And you can see the cars kind of moving next to him, and it doesn't look like he's moving at all. But you're going to love listening to Jared's heart. He just has such a heart for what God's doing, and he wants to be in the middle of it so bad. And I think we're blessed to be partners with Jared and what's happening in Kenya. So, I mean, Elaine, you maybe more than anybody else in our church family, you know what it means to stay in relationship with our missionaries and to stay connected to our missionaries. You do such a good job with that. Why is that so important?
I think it's just so important that we stay connected with them in the way that they encourage us, the way we can encourage them. It's a strengthening on both sides.
Plow through it, Elaine. Plow through it.
It just strengthens us on both sides.
Be a professional.
Just to continue. I was caught off guard.
I saw him coming a long way away.
But it just built, that relationship grows, and that relationship as a brother and sister in Christ is just phenomenal, and it just strengthens me. It gives me hope to see the hope they have, and their hope and their dependence on God just is astounding. And you'll hear that when you hear Jared speak. The Kenyan people totally rely on God. They completely rely on God. They don't have the things that we have in place here to get other help, to be able to find food somewhere. They don't have that. A lot of the government agencies, there's not that kind of thing there. So just that relationship that we build.
And that's one of the things I know. There's a lot to take in this interview. And, Jared's English is good, but it's still hard listening to him. And so I do want you to pay attention to these next 17 or 18 minutes. And one of the things that I want you to listen for is, again, Elaine, what you're talking about. Jared and they live like the widow in the Old Testament who just had a tiny bit of oil and just a tiny bit, in the bottom of the jar, and just have to live day to day, week to week, depending on God. And you hear that. You'll hear that.
That's right. You do hear that. And, some of the things that I've learned going to Kenya and being around these children and being around the people in the community is that dependence. And, they're hungry all the time. Being hungry is nothing new for them. It is an all the time thing. And relying on God to provide something is a very real thing for them, not just something they say.
Yeah.
They truly, truly live and believe that. And their little bit, they're just so grateful for, and the things they take in their life. Death is a common thing there. Mm-hmm. And that, I remember one little girl telling me, we just have to accept it. Death is inevitable. We just have to accept it and go on. And that's just the strength they draw from God. And
it's so different and so inspiring. Mm-hmm. It's so good.
And their joy is just the same way too.
Yep.
Their joy is just as huge.
Over
just
the
as
top.
huge, over the top.
All right. Well, this is our missionary at Ring Road in Alara in Kisumu, Kenya, Jared Odhiambo.
I want to say thank you for putting us in your daily prayers, and above all for the support that you've been giving unto us. There are real challenges that are going on in Kenya, especially for the less fortunate people in the society. Let's start with Nyalenda slums, where you know the situation. You've been here, you've seen what is happening. The situation now is worse because majority of those people are leaving the town and leaving the slums and going to work in town. Unfortunately, right now, 70% cannot go to work because most of the places are closed right now. Statistically, 35% of people from Nyalenda are doing the fishing business. Most of them of their business staff are coming from the lake. And this is kind of gone down due to the fact that most of the people have left town and have gone to the village. Besides, 60% of these people are working in the city. And what we've realized is that most of the businesses in town are closed right away. that is because, you know, the timing, just the other day, they lifted the curfew from 7 to 9, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any impact. So people in the slums of Nyalenda are suffering. And that is why when the schools were closed, we were kind of thinking that most of them must have gone back to the village to visit with their relatives due to the fact of the pandemic. But unfortunately, or fortunately for us, is that 90% are still staying around because of what we are giving to them. So the situation is not that very good, but God is good on our side because we can afford to give them food that they are using during this pandemic time.
Okay, so most of them, so you're saying that most of them are staying there in Nyalenda instead of going to the villages?
Yes, most of them are staying in Nyalenda. Yeah, because even when they go back to the village, some of their relatives who are working in Nairobi are also facing the same things that people are facing in Nyalenda. Nairobi is more worse right now because most hotels are closed. For example, St. Anna's is close 90%. There are only a few, 2 or 3, who are coming to work. So the situation is worse, and our kids are all around. And what we are trying to do is, we decided the other day that we'll put some loaves of bread. And what we realized again is that not only our kids are coming in for this food, there are also kids from the community, which you guys have seen wherever you are around. They are all coming over to get the little from us. You know, Ring Road is like an oasis of hope in the middle of that area. So what I wanted to say is that God has been so good to us, and we can also extend our hand to make a difference in someone's life.
I'm curious, Jared, speaking of the community around the church at Ring Road in the Nyalenda slum, many elderly women especially, and many adults with HIV. These are people that are at high risk for the virus. What impact have you seen on them as far as their overall health? And then how have you been able to help that particular group of people, the elderly and those most affected by the virus?
What is happening at Ring Road is that the clinic is still working. And so these people can still come and get their ARVs, you know, the medicine. And what we are doing when they come in, there is a place where they can walk over to the store, the food store, the kitchen, and then they can pick food. In fact, as a matter of fact, we've made an agreement that Tuesday next week, Evans and our community workers, like you walk every time when you are here, is going to walk around and give some food to them. And the other day we also talked to the county government of Kisumu, and through James, who had been a leader before, we managed to get some food that would feed about 50 people. And so James is walking around as well to try and give out food to these people. And we are also planning next Sunday, we are planning to give out food to church members as well, because this is all over. And our membership, you know that they're also in the class of Nyalenda slum. So they are coming back and expecting from us as a church. The other time we got from our contribution and the support that we got from Central, we did give out food stuff to members of the church. And we are longing to do that again as soon as we get some little support.
Yes, and we'll continue to do that. So your ministry, what you're doing with Ring Road, has gone beyond what you normally do. You're feeding more people than you normally would because of all the pandemic and things that are happening.
Absolutely, it is too much, Mama. And when you check on the number of calls that we are getting the number of, some. And one thing I also realized the other day, that some of the siblings of kids who are at Ring Road, some of them are not members of the Ring Road school or part of the Ring Road school. They are all there in one family, about 10, and are expecting us to feed them. And if you go to CRF right now, there are families like we have 4, but we are sending money through mobile M-Pesa to these people, because at times we don't want them to come to Ring Road, because immediately 5 people are seen coming in, about 100 people will come in because they know there is food at Ring Road. Yesterday, I ordered like 40 bags of maize, and I'm planning to give that out very soon. And so it's like borrowing from Paul to pay Peter. The supply is ready to give us food stuff. When money comes in, we are paying it. And we are saying, God knows we will clear all this debt, but we have to make a difference in the community, because they look at Ring Road as the place to be and the place to get something from.
So it is truly, Ring Road is truly the light in the middle of all of that, even more so than ever.
Yes.
What about at Alara, Jared? What are some of the differences? It's a completely different situation for our members, where Nalinda is one of the larger slums in Africa. Alara is much different in that it's a more rural setting. So what different challenges have you seen there, and how's the situation different there?
Okay. The situation is more like the same, based on the fact that, as I said, people from town moved back to the village, because some of them had lost their jobs, so they came back to stay with their relatives or their parents. And so the same case scenario that we are having at Ring Road, where we, in a family of 4, it has started to be a family of 10. We realize that the same people are facing the same challenges that we have at Ring Road. But the difference in the village is that they don't pay rent. So that is an added advantage for them. So whatever was meant for rent is what they are using in the community to do other things. So the most thing that is needed is food. People doesn't care about anything else. So what we are trying to do at Alara is the same thing that we are trying to do at Ring Road. Like the other day, I brought in together about 50 families, where we talked and we shared and we promised that we're gonna give them food. They are not part of the Ring Road school. They are not part of the Alara school. They are not part of the Elaine Nesbitt High School. They are not part of the of the Alara Church of Christ. But there are people from the community, the Catholics who are there. They say, hey, this is a place where we believe and we know that people are supporting you from abroad. So we expect you in a polite way to support us. So we can't stop them from coming over. So we try to do our level best. And the pandemic is, it's getting into the peak of it in Kenya. Like right now, we are having 3,094 cases. I know that is peanut according to American cases. And we have about 1,048 people have recovered. And we've only gotten, by today, we are having about 90 deaths. So we believe that things may change, but according to their projection, it's gonna get worse. Like Kisumu, again, yesterday we had 4 cases. Today we are having 3 cases. So it's growing day by day, and we have only 1 testing center, and people are afraid to go for the test down at the CDC, which is about on your way to Thomas's place. That is why we have the American CDC place. So people are afraid. We don't have all these machines. We have only about 40 beds, ICU beds in the whole of Kisumu County, with a population of over 1.2 million. So we are leaving everything in the hands of God.
Mm-hmm. So there's only one place that you can go for testing in Kisumu, just that one?
Yes, it is one.
And the case, how many cases are you saying they're having in Kisumu? Have you seen cases in Nyalenda, or people are just not getting tested?
No, in Nyalenda, we've not, people are not tested yet. There are only people who are volunteering. And the only way that they can take you for quarantine or for testing is like, before you get into a country, there is a testing center where they would stop you and check on your temperature. After seeing that your temperature is high, then they will say that we need to take you for quarantine for 14 days. You're gonna stay there, and after that, then they will monitor you each and every day and check on the growth or the decrease or the increase of your temperature. And that is how it's happening. On the other side, there are volunteers who would go straight away for the CDC test. But if you come out from the quarantine place after the isolation, and they realize that you are positive, obviously the next thing is that they will put you in for medication.
You said that you're just now reaching the peak of the virus. Can you kind of maybe look into the future? What do you see as far as needs that will be in the immediate future, and then long term, what are some of the needs that this pandemic has warranted that you might need in the short term, and then long term? What are your needs?
Let me start with our short-term needs. As far as the environment of Ring Road Fraternity is concerned, when talking about Alara, Ring Road, Elaine Nesbitt, Lakeside and Sommerhouse Girls Center, one thing that we need to do is to look for ways of getting food. Food is a short-term because we need it every day, but it will also turn to be a long-term because of its continuity. And what I wanted to say is that we will appreciate any support, extra support, because there is a great need. And when you're talking about long term, when you're talking about long term, I personally think that we can check on what the government is going to say on education sector, because right now the plan is to resume classes in September, but my guess is that it will not happen, because by September, if things are not well, if we do not know our status based on the test, then this thing the mortality rate will go high, and that will affect most people, especially people in the slums. Right now in Nairobi, the highest numbers are coming from Kibera slums, the largest slum in the world or in Africa. So we are worried about Nyalenda slums as well, because of the congestion, the way people live, the way people love each other, the way people share in their deep poverty. So that is something that is a real concern to us. But what I wanted to say, the short-term things that we need is food for continuity. The long-term things that are there cannot be predicted right now based on the situation. We'll just know them later. But as at now, we need food, we need face masks. The other day I gave out face masks, but I realized that when they get these face masks, they're also going back and sharing them with their relatives. So when they come to Ring Road the following day, when we are giving out food, they don't have them. So we have to look for a way for getting them. And one is going for 50 cents right now for face masks. And if you buy in plenty, you can get them for 40 cents. American 40 cents, which is Kenyan 40 shillings or 50
shillings. Let me ask you one more question and then we can just visit some too. But what have you seen? What has been the surprising thing to you in seeing how God's working in all of this?
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to talk about, the surprise that I'm seeing, is that whatever the situation, however tough it is, God is opening another door for us in Africa. And the other day, a lady whom I met at Alara, we were giving food out on that day. And then we closed the gate because there were many people who wanted to come in. And then when I walked out, I met this 80 years old lady, on her stick. And I asked her, what's the problem? And she told me she didn't talk. She just touched her belly. And she said, I am angry. I pulled 500 shillings because I never wanted to go back with her to the store. So when I gave her 500 shillings and I told her that this is enough for 5 tins of corn flour, and what she said, God, she started with God. Thank you so much for this. I've gone 3 days without food because she's an old widow who has nothing. Yesterday, I think I did send you some picture. I heard of a lady who was suffering and she was rejected. No one was concerned. About a mile from where we did the last house last year. And she just sent someone to come and talk to us. And so I went there, I did some shopping and took food to her. And she said, oh, thank you so much. Next time when the church resumes, I want to go and see that church that is out to help people without any relationship with them. They are just ready to assist. So God works in a different way. And I'm realizing that He's using people in a different way to reach the world and to let people know about Him during our hard times and during our good times. So in a different way, or in a short way, I want to say God works according to His own will, based in whatever situation, whether good or bad.
Well, Jared, God bless you for the work that you're doing and for always being willing to jump into whatever situation. You've never shied away from any hard situation, and you're such an example to so many. We love you and we pray for you often.
Thank you so much. I wanted also to say thank you for standing with us and for trusting us with this work, and above all for God to bring us together as a family and to share the much that you've sent to us. To you, it may look little, but to us, it touches 1,000 of people and souls. And at the end of the day, they're seeing the light through what we are doing. And the name of God is being glorified each and every time. I fully appreciate what Central is doing for us and what Christian Relief Fund is doing for one. Thank you.
So does Jared know that he's driving a car with the steering wheel on the wrong side? Is the video backwards? What's going on?
No, it's on the wrong side from us.
It is on the wrong
It is
side.
on the wrong side for us.
I love listening to Jared. It is hard, but man, you just hear that the conditions are so different from what we experience here, and the need is so great. And I am struck by, and Tony and Jared both said this tonight, I'm struck by the fact that we're so concerned about them and wanting to take care of them. And so we're giving Jared extra, during this pandemic. We're trying to help him out as much as we can. He's not concerned about himself. He's only concerned about other people, even outside of their ministry there.
Definitely. He's seeing the need, but in a different way than he has felt before is what I got from him and visiting with him even later, because they are a light in that area, but their light is even brighter now because it is really drawing people to them, because they know they can go there and they're going to get some food, they're going to get some help, there's going to be something there for them. And he is able to preach Jesus, teach Jesus in a way that he hasn't before. And that is an overwhelming thing to him, but he is just humbled by it. He's so humbled by it. But he is always that way in the slum and anywhere he goes. But it is like thousandfold now.
Yeah.
People are really looking to him.
And it energizes him, you can tell.
It does.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you know Jared better than anybody here, Elaine. When you talked to him, and you and Tim did this a few days ago, what is it that you hear in Jared's heart? What is it that you see with what Jared's doing that may be a lesson we can learn, something that we need to take to heart and be reminded of and maybe put into practice or think about more carefully?
I think that Jared sees people differently. He sees Jesus in them, definitely, but he takes them in. He preaches with them. He teaches Jesus, but he goes even further than that. His heart is definitely the heart of God, and his love for these children, for these people in the slum. I have watched him since 2009, since our first trip there. I have watched him work tirelessly. I do not know how the man stays as healthy as he does. He works tirelessly taking care of children. You can ask him about a child, and he's going to know who you're talking about, and he's going to know what that situation is. And it has increased from the 300 or 400 children when we first went to almost 1,200 children now. And he is keeping tabs, and he has people in place and taking care of these children. And it has moved beyond that into taking care of these families in the slum. Even when we walk through the community and take food to people that are homebound with HIV, with AIDS, with cancer, and they don't have anyone, they're taking food. Jared has a clinic there. They take food to the people. And we go on the summers, we'll go to a few of the homes and pray with them, hear their stories. So he's going beyond the children, and he is going into people that are marginalized and cast aside and not taken care of by anyone. And he's stepping up to that.
Somebody told me a long time ago that you love them till they follow you home. And that literally is how he does it. He loves people until they're on him, and then he shows them Jesus.
He does, and it's so easy for us to help, and we can by giving funds and by donating. We can do that, but he gives his whole self.
Yeah.
He gives his whole self, and his wife Scala is his support, and she is amazing. But definitely, it's all his time that he gives to people. And we're much more conservative with our time and how we're going to spend it and who we're going to give it to.
Yes,
and that is not the way it is with him at all.
Well, what I've learned tonight out of listening to Tony and to Jared is, one, I am given a new sense and a richer sense of my own blessings where I live. There's a deeper gratitude for me tonight for the blessings that I know I take for granted, but there's also a renewed responsibility to share those blessings, whatever I have, however little or however much. As Christians, we have a responsibility to share our resources, and time is the most valuable resource I have, to share it with others in the name of Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for doing that with Jared and for sharing your time with us tonight. Thank you for joining us. Next week, on much of these same channels, we'll bring you Kevin and his keyboard, part 2. So that'll be a night of song and praise and story time with our worship minister, Kevin Schaefer. So we'll do that next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock right here on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. And I think that's it. We held off Isaiah and Rainey just pretty well. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. May the peace and the power and the presence of Jesus sustain you, and most of all, keep you